Born B'Shem Hashem, B'Shem Irgen Shir Torah of the Covenant, introduce our Rabbi Yakov Z. Smith for today's Shir and Dinei Tvilas Keli, mafrish Chalal, Shabbos Yomtov. Mitzvos that can't be done on Shabbos. To have the great Tzchus sponsoring a Shir, call Irgen Shir Torah at 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Rabbi Smith.
Someone, his wife made challah for Shabbos. That was the good news. The bad news, she forgot to be mafrish challah min ha'isa. So now basically the table is set with bread, lechem, that's also to eat on Shabbos. And the question is, is there any heta to be mafrish challah on Shabbos? Or we had a shayla with someone's shver bought him a becha, especially for Pesach, Leil Seder, and told him you have to toivel this becha, because the shalif is made by a yid or a guy. And remember to toivel it before Yomtov. And the fellow forgot, and he wanted to know, could he toivel it on Yomtov itself? A third shayla about someone supposed to kasher an item that he needed on Shabbos, and he forgot. Is there any heta to toivel to kasher something on Shabbos or Yomtov when possible? So we'll soon see other questions, but as we see, we have a very unique group of shaylas for today, and that is the question, to put it bluntly, an item needs a repair, a ruchnius repair. L'mashal, you have to be mafrish challah from the lechem, you have to toivel a keli, you have to kasher a keli. Is that considered the issur of tikkun keli, tikkun mana, or not? Now let me explain. We know the Gemara says in Makis that Gimel Amid Beis, if someone has a talis cotton that he made, but he forgot to cut out a hole to put his head through it. You can't wear a talis cotton, it doesn't have a hole in the center. So the Gemara says in Makis that Gimel Amid Beis, HaPeseach Beis Hatzava B'Shabbos Chayiv Chatos. Cutting out that hole is Chayiv Chatos als Tikkun Keli. I'll give a more contemporary example. According to many shitas, you open a soda bottle on Shabbos. So the problem is you're making a cap out of the soda, you're making a cap out of the cap itself. It wasn't usable. And when you twist it off, you're making a cap on Shabbos. Those are some examples of tikkun keli that's also on Shabbos. Our group, l'chayra, is also a tikkun keli. You're turning from issa into heta. The bread that you have, you can't eat because you didn't take off challah. Taking off challah, you're being machshir the lechem. Or the keli you can't use because it wasn't toiveled. So by toiveling it, you're really making the keli from assur to mutter. Or when you kasher something, you're certainly making it from assur to kosher. Maybe the fact that you're making it from issa to heta is also a form of tikkun keli. Or maybe we'll say, no, tikkun keli throughout Shas is a noticeable physical change. You cut out the hole in the talis cotton, you open a soda cap. Here, you're not doing anything to the challah, you just be mafrish, well, you have to. You're not doing anything to the keli, you're toiveling it, but there's no noticeable physical change. Maybe that's not tikkun keli. Or maybe you'll say, what's the chiluk? Lamaisa, the food is assur. Now it's mutter. You know, if you have Torah eyeglasses, you see a big tikkun from treif to kosher. Why does it have to be noticeable? And the fact that you're doing a mitzvah, that in itself is not a heta. We have a mishnah in Beis, Daf Lamavav, Beis, a whole list of things that we isurim, even though it's mitzvahs. So the fact that it's a mitzvah is not the heta. We have to try to find a makar that when you make a unnoticeable ruchnius change, is that assur or not? No. So for Daf Yomi Yidin, it shouldn't be so hard. You learned the Mishnah in Sukkah Daf Lamed Beis. If you have a hadas that has too many berries on it, so you can't use it on sukkahs for the dalad minim. But if you take off the berries, then the hadas is kosher. Ve'ein mamatim b'yomtiv. You can't correct the hadas on Yomtiv. Why not? So the Gemara, because you misakin mana. So Rashi explains, because the hadas as it is with too many berries is pasul, because it's not hadar, and you're making it kosher. So you're making a hadas from pasul to kosher. No, here we have a beautiful raya. Even though it's a mitzvah, but there's still an issur of tikkun mana. So why don't we apply that to our case of kashering, or taking off challah, or the toiveling? But wait, there's a pashta chilik. Because as we said, the problem with the hadas is it's not hadar. So you take off the berries, you're making from not nice into nice. That's a noticeable physical change. But who said kashering or taking off challah is taka assur? So let's suggest a different source, and that's the Gemara in Shabbos Kuvav. The Gemara says, as we know, that of course you're allowed to, it's a mitzvah to do milah bizmana on Shabbos. But let's say it's milah shaloi bizmana, so that's not only, it's not a mitzvah, but it's an issur deraisa of tikkun. Mali tikkun lasakin milah, mali lasakin keli, zok the Gemara. And Rashi explains, you're masakin gavra, you're changing the person. Oh, no, this is also a ruchnius change. Orla, Mila is a mitzvah for Yidden only. And yet the Gemara calls it Masakin. Is that what we're looking for? Also not really. Because there, besides the mitzvah, there's also a physical change. Going from an oral to a mohol is an obvious, noticeable physical change besides the mitzvah. So we don't have any rayas from these two cases. But l'chayra might be custom-made raya is a Mishnah in Beya Yud Zayin Amud Beis. The Mishnah says, and as the Gemara puts it, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree you're not allowed to toivel a keli on Shabbos or Yomtov. Ein toiveling kelim b'Shabbos or b'Yomtov. Toiveling is not a noticeable physical change. And yet the Mishnah says, the kol days it's also to toivel on Shabbos or Yomtov. So it's a perfect raya. But there's one obvious problem. When you learn the Mishnah, you'll notice the Mishnah is not talking about toiveling a new keli you bought from a guy. The Mishnah is talking about a keli that's tamei, and you're toiveling to take out the tumah. In fact, the Mishnah is even talking about a beggar that's tamei. It's not a new keli, it's a keli tamei. But then again, wait a second. So, if the true, it's talking about a keli tamei. But if the Mishnah asks keli tamei, even though it's not noticeable and it's not a physical change, why can't we say hu adin, a new keli? In other words, you're right. There's tumas kelim and tfilas kelim. The Mishnah asks tumas kelim. But let's assume if tumas kelim is awesome, so too tfilas kelim. So that makes sense, but you have to do this properly. Because you have to first understand why taka is tumas kelim also. If the reasons apply to tfilas kelim, good. If the reasons don't apply, you can't say hu adin. So when you learn the Gemara, on Takabeya, on that same sugya, the Gemara has 4 reasons, to make a long story short, why you're not allowed to toivel a tamei keli. Rabbi's reason is because you might come to carry. You're going to go to the mikveh, you're going to carry it to the mikveh. And we lost 3 mitzvahs, yikarais, lulav, shaifa, and megillah because chashash haitzah. So one reason is haitzah. The second reason, Zak the Gemara, is a chashash schita. Now schita sounds funny, but it's not. Because if you assume you're toiveling a jacket or a beggar that's tamei, you're going to squeeze it out. So the second reason is schita. The third reason is shema yisha. Rashi explains, if you're going to be allowed to toivel on Yomtov, you're going to push everything off till Yomtov and leave all the tamei kelim in the house. And you're going to end up being matama other things. That's a chorban. You're matama food, you're matama yourself. So you can't keep a keli tamei in your house. Shema yisha. And the fourth reason is music to our ears. And Rava Amma, b'pnei shenira k'misaken. You're taking something tamei and making it into tahar. That's nira k'misaken. Now please notice a very mild lashon, nira k'misaken. Why does the Gemara say misaken? We'll get back to that. But here we have 4 reasons why you can't toivel a tamei keli. Haitzah, schita, shema yisha, and nira k'misaken. The question is, which is the main reason the halacha? So Reiz Apella, the Rif on our Gemara in Beya says that the 2 reasons that are ikka is chashash schita and shema yisha. Zok the Beis Yosef and our Simon in our Chaim Shin Chav Gimel, Oy Bazoi, we could say that you're allowed to lechatchila toivel a new keli that you bought from a guy on Shabbos. Why? Because there's no chashash shema yischat, there's no schita, you can't wring out a pot. And also there's no chashash shema yisha, we'll soon see why. But lemaisa, both reasons don't apply. So according to the Rif, there's no issur whatsoever toiveling a new keli on Shabbos. The Rambam in Hilchos Yomtov Daled Yazayin only quotes the reason of shema yisha. So again, Zok the Beis Yosef, according to the Rif and the Rambam, there's no issur of toiveling a goyish keli on Shabbos. However, you could understand why many Rishonim argue. Zok the Rosh in Beya, Perek Beis, Siman Yud Beis, but the main reason seemed to be carrying, like we acid, Lulav, Shaifa, and Megillah, and also Nirka Masakin. And that's why, according to the Rosh, Zok the Rosh, Mi'elu Shnei Taimim, Asa Lahatfil Kelim Chadashim B'Yomtiv. And of course, who are then on Shabbos? In other words, this question, what's the reason why Tumas Kelim is Asa? The nafkamina would be, is there an issur of toiveling a new keli on Shabbos? Now, before we apply this lamaisa, I want to point out that there are other reasons why maybe tfilas kelim is even more mutter than tumah, and I'll explain. A keli tameh that touches something else is matama something else. So a keli tameh, I'll use the word, is contagious. If it's contagious, it's of gahak tetzaros. And if you are matarit, that you're masakin it. A keli shaloi tavel zok the Ramon, the end in Yeridei, the end of Siman Kuf Chaf. If you mistakenly cooked in a pot that you didn't toivel, the food is not treif. It's a mitzvah to toivel, but it's not treif. So, if so, why is it nirka masakin if it doesn't contaminate the food? A keli tameh is contagious. A keli shaloi tavel doesn't affect the food, so there's no masakin. Also, some poskim hold that tfilas kelim, the mitzvah is only midrabanan. Even though we paskin that it's a mitzvah deraisa, but all agree the issur of using a keli shaloi tavel is only midrabanan. No, if it's only a derabanan, who said it's a masakin? You have the issur derabanan, but that doesn't make it that it's assur, that you have to, it's a problem of tikkun. And also, as the Shagisarya in Siman Nun Vav points out, that by Tumah, there's no other way of changing it except for toiveling. So the toiveling is misakin it. Regarding a keli shaloi tavel, we'll soon see other eitzes. You could give it to a guy, you could use it for storage, but there are ways of using it without toiveling it. So oy bazoi, it's not so bad in the first place, as it is. And that's why Lamaisa, the Beis Yosef, is of the opinion that you're allowed to lechatchila toivel on Shabbos or Yomtov and make a bracha. There's nothing wrong. And in Shulchan Aruch, in Archaim Shinchav Gimel Zayin, mutar lahatfil klei chadash aton tefillah. That's the Mechaber's opinion. But he adds v'yesh oisrim. Now, if you know the derech of the Mechaber, when he says something stam, and then he says, oh, some hold differently, what is his true feeling? The halach is mutter. So Lamaisa, the Mechaber holds it's mutter, and we know why. The reason is Shema Yisha, or the other reason of Schita doesn't apply to Tfilas Kelim. However, the Ramon Darkei Moshe, Sifkot and Gimel, says the main reason that you're not allowed to tovel Tumah is because of Mesakein, or carrying, and that applies to Tfilas Kelim as well. The Aruch HaShulchan in Shinchav Gimel Sif Yud is matmiya on the Beis Yosef, because in Hilchos Shabbos, the Rambam does mention the issur of Shema Yisakim, of Nirka Masakim. So why did the Beis Yosef look at the Rambam Hilchos Yomtiv and not in Hilchos Shabbos? And the funny thing is that the Mechaber in Yeridei, in the end of Siman Kuf Chaf, Yeridei Kuf Chaf is Hilchos Tfilas Kelim. The Mechaber says, if you forgot to toivel before Shabbos, you better find an eitzah, which we'll soon see. But there he doesn't even mention that it's mutter. So that's why we're going to say the following maskana, that even though the Beis Yosef seems to be mekel, but the Ramah holds that you're not allowed to toivel on Shabbos or Yomtov, and even the Mechaber says better find an issur. But before we apply this specifically, I'd like to make one point I think we'll all appreciate. The Gemara and Rashi, when they speak about toiveling a tamei item, use the mild lashon of nirakim mesakim. Now, when the Gemara speaks about hadassim or mila, the Gemara says it's tikkun, real tikkun. Why regarding Tumah does the Gemara say nirakim mesakim? Zogtim in chaschinach in Musach Shabbos, Chav Zayin Gimel, a beautiful yisoid. Because tamei is not a noticeable, real problem. It's not a problem. Lashon is, it's not a tikkun b'derech ha'olam. You're not correcting something physically. Therefore, it's only nirakim mesakim. But hadassim that have too many berries is a physical problem. If it's a physical problem, it's a real mesakim. In other words, it's true what we said. Toiveling something is a lower level of an issur. It's only a nirakim mesakim. Now, lemaisa, nirakim mesakim is still assur. But so let's chazar over and apply this lemaisa. Taka, toiveling something, whether it's from tumah or from kalim, even though they're a makilim, the Shulchan Aruch certainly advises finding an eitzah, and the Ramah holds it's assur to toivel. Now, it's not a real, regular tikkun mana deraisa, it's a nirakim mesakim, it's assur midrabanan. Okay, now let's apply it lemaisa. Let's start with the kshayla that it's pretty often. A person was supposed to toivel it before Shabbos and he didn't. But the good news is he remembered right away, right after this man. And this is what's called the Bein HaShmashos period. Now, Bein HaShmashos, of course, fluctuates anything between 30, 40, 50, or even 60 minutes after Shkia. But let's talk about your Bein HaShmashos, depending on when you hold his tzeis. But the question is there any more heta to toivel something now because it's not yet tzeis, it's only Bein HaShmashos. So this, especially if you have a Nusach Ashkenaz, you should know this. This is the Mishnah in Shabbos, Lamed Daled. Nusach Ashkenaz says it before Baruch Hu every Friday night, that Safek Chashecha Ein Matbilim. You're not allowed to toivel something. So you have a riot, you're not allowed to toivel Bein HaShmashos. And the Mechaber Reish Samach Aleph quotes this. But if you learn the Mishnayos properly, you know the Mishnah is talking about what type of tefillah. Not tefillah's kalim that you bought from a guy. It's talking about tamei kalim like the Mishnah Bay is talking about. So there's no riot to tefillah's kalim. But Zok the Mishnah Berurah in Sif Kat and Hay, why did the Mechaber bring this in Archaim if it's no longer negayah? Tumah is no longer negayah b'zman hazeh. Zok the Mishnah Berurah, because hu adin, you're not allowed to toivel a new keli bein hashmashos, because nirakim mesakim. In other words, just like we compared it earlier, we're comparing it here as well. Takan the Mishnah is talking about tumas kelim, but lamaisa ein matbilim, hu adin ein matbilim, a keli that you bought from a guy. But, and here the Mishnah Berurah adds, based on a Tazai Magen Avram, the general klal is bein hashmashos, you could be mekel b'makom tzorech. And if you have a keli that you need on Shabbos and you can't be without, and it's still bein hashmashos, you're allowed to toivel it. Now you yourself a yid with a bracha. Why? Because Chazal were mekel b'makom tzorech bein hashmashos, not vadei laila. So that's a very welcome yisoid. If this person that has to toivel is becha, because otherwise Yisrael will be upset at him, and it's still bein hashmashos, he could go run to the mikveh and toivel it even with the bracha. Now, the Paiskim discuss, the Shagasari, I should say, in the end of Sim Mazayin is taka mekel bein hashmashos, but only glass that's midrabanan, because it's a tikkun on the rabbanan is not so bad. But the most place, Mr. Brewer, is not mechalik. Even a metal keli, bein hashmashos, you're allowed to toivel with the bracha. Next question is, what's included in the issur? So the Mishnah Berurah says something interesting. So you've got Lamed Beis, he quotes the Pri Megadim. If you hold that you're allowed to toivel a new keli on Shabbos, then even a metal keli. But we paskin, you're not allowed to toivel a keli, nirakim mesakim, so even a glass keli, it's only chayim midrabanan, is still awesome, because you can use it, and now you could use it. So it comes out l'alacha, you can't even toivel a glass keli, which only be the Rabbanan, but it's a tikkun Rabbanan. And that you're not allowed to toivel once it's Shabbos. Now, what's interesting, sometimes a caterer could have this shaila, that they have a simcha on Shabbos, and they push it, don't have enough dishes. Now, typically, caterers use porcelain. We once discussed this bariches, but porcelain is basically cheres, which is not chayiv and tefillah, and has a thin glaze of glass. Many poskim hold there's no chayiv on porcelain, so we're machmir to toivel it b'lei bracha, but porcelain, I could put it bluntly, is a suffix at most the Rabbanan, because at the most chayiv is it's like glass, but the truth is it's primarily cheres. So the question is maybe to toivel porcelain a suffix in the Rabbanan. So I saw in the Sefer Shabbos b'Shabbate on Kuf Samach Dalet, he says that taka you could be mekel, because it's a suffix in a D'Rabbanan. Suffix D'Rabbanan is not a tikkun. Now what's interesting, the Mishnah Berurah in Sivkot Lamed Gimel discusses our shaila. Let's you have a keli that you have a suffix if you're chayiv and tefillah. Now the truth is, a typical silver today, and this is important to mention, I'm not saying across the board, but I will say this is a metzias. We always understood you have a becha, you don't have to toivel it. A becha that has Jewish letters, it's made of covered Shabbos, whatever, made by Yid. That's not so pashut. It's not, the metzias is not so clear. Very often they have goyim making it, bekablanis, and the Yid buys it, or the Yid owns it, but it's made by a goy. So I'm not going to say anything specifically, but I did find out from one of the main distributors of silver today. He says many, if not most, of his items he advises toivel without a bracha, because he commissioned it, but it was made by a goy bekablanis. So we're assuming that you have to. It's a suffix if it was. Let's say you have a suffix if it's chayiv and tefillah. So Mishnah Berurah says if you have a suffix if you're chayiv and tefillah, you're allowed to toivel it on Shabbos. I guess he holds it's not really a tikkun, because maybe you don't have to toivel it. But here I saw an interesting ha'ara, the K'tzais HaShulchan in Kuf Mem Vav Hey, he quotes this Mr. Berurah, and he said, I don't understand. You have a suffix, that's true. But what did the Rav tell you? Mi suffix, you have to toivel it. And until you toivel it, you can't use it. So it's the same Nereka Masakin. True, it's only a suffix chiyuv. But if you're not going to use it without tefillah, so the tefillah is being masakin it. So that's a good taina, but we know the Mishnah Berurah's psak is our psak. Apparently the Mishnah Berurah held you can't call that a tikkun if it's only a suffix problem. So we'll say that if you could do it before Shabbos, avad the better, but the Mishnah Berurah paskins, if you have a suffix, if somebody's chayiv in tefillah, yesh lahakol, toivel it on Shabbos. The next question, the really challenging question is, let's say you're in the worst scenario. You have a keli that you certainly is chayiv in tefillah, and it's beyond bein hashmoshes, it's real Shabbos. Is there any eitzah? And I'll tell you, in Ma'aser Shahaya, you see how it's kedai to learn halacha, because sometimes it's a lifesaver. A shul urn broke during the week, and they told the Gabi, listen, you better get a new urn before Shabbos, because Shabbos, you don't have hot water, you're going to lose your job, and people are going to be in the throw, you're going to fire you. So he remembered to buy the urn, but Friday morning, he realized that he didn't toivel it. And he realized, Baruch Hashem, that if he toivels it now and doesn't let it dry for 48 hours, when he plugs it in, it's going to break, and then he's going to be fired. So now, it's Friday morning, but he can't toivel it. Is there any eitzah to use a keli sheloi tavel, whether it's Friday morning, or typically Friday Shabbos? You can't toivel. So here we come to a chiddush. The Shulchan Aruch Bayos, Shin Chav Gimel Zayin, who says, Yesh Oisib to toivel on Shabbos. He says, let's say you didn't toivel it, and you don't want to be saimach on the sheet you're allowed to toivel. Simple eitzah. Get a hold of a guy, and give him the keli b'matana. A real kinyan, let it become his. Then you borrow back from him, you're allowed to use it without tefillah. Now this might sound funny, I'm giving it to a guy. Isn't that the problem? It belongs to a guy? You're right. The reason we have to toivel because it belongs to a guy, but in this case it's a solution. Because the poskim say a keli owned by a guy, there's no chiyuv tefillah. Or better yet, tefillah won't even work. The tefillah works as the Taz in the beginning of Kuf Chav says, to take out from Tumas Akim and put into Kedushas Yisrael. But if the keli belongs to a guy and you're just borrowing it, tefillah won't help. And that's taka muskim al-chaladeis. If you borrow a keli from a guy and you use it, you're allowed to use it without tefillah. I don't know if the Olim even realize it, but we saimach on this. Those that go, they go to a hotel, they have to take out a client, or some go in Fishaduchim, and they buy soda in a glass cup, and of course the soda is perfectly kosher. But what's the heter with the glass? It wasn't toiveled. Teretz, there's a keli that belongs to a guy, there's no chiyuv tefillah. No. So the machaba, based on a Mordechai in Beya Tafrei Shayin Zayin, is saying a very practical eitzah. Whether it's Erev Shabbos and you can't toivel, like in the case of the urn, or it's Shabbos and you can't toivel it, give it to a guy, and then you could use without tefillah. Now, of course, the problem is, how could you give it to a guy? You're not going to make a kinyan on Shabbos. Either Mordechai says you could do this eitzah, maybe the Mordechai is talking about you doing it Erev Shabbos, giving it to a guy. So Mr. Brewer says the heta is, and a chanam, you're not going to make a kinyan on Shabbos, but the tzorech Shabbos, you're allowed to make a kinyan. So you give it to the guy on Shabbos, make the kinyan l'tzoyrech Shabbos. Now, Lamaisa, I want to tell you, it's interesting. COVID, actually, Pesach, Tavshin Pei, when COVID was at its height, so there was a pressing issue that hundreds of Yungalite, probably thousands of Yungalite, who never made Pesach in their lives, didn't have a Pesach dish to their name, suddenly they had to make their own Seder. And they had to buy pots and dishes and everything, and the mikvahs were closed. So you had thousands of dishes that have to be toiveled, and there's no mikvah. So one of the Rabbanim had a brilliant einfall. He said that in the mechiras chametz that the Rabbanim made with the guy, they included all the new kalim. It's interesting. We don't sell our pots to the guy, even though it's chametz, because then you have to toivel it. But here, Erev Pesach, they sold all the new dishes to the guy. After Pesach, of course, they sold it back. And of course, you have to remember that next Pesach, we should be all gesund. You have to toivel it then. You can't use it till you toivel it. But I thought it was a beautiful einfall how, so the Torah, so the Chacham, like my Baba used to say. He used the halacha, the practical, lamaisa. But anyhow, this is the eitzah of the Mordechai. Now, the exact procedure needs a little fine tuning. First of all, what kinyan could you make with a guy on Shabbos? He can't give you money, you can't buy it. No chalipim we don't make on Shabbos. So either you could make mashicha, the guy is moishechit, but he can't carry it because then he's carrying it for you. So you have to be within an Erev. Or the guy makes hagbah. But there has to be a full-fledged kinyan. And another point I wanted to mention, and that is the Taz has a problem with this eitzah. Now listen to the Taz's problem. So up to Taz, it's very good. You'll give it to the guy. You'll give the guy the urn, and he'll make a kinyan before Shabbos, or on Shabbos you'll give the guy the bech, and you'll use it gesundheit. After Shabbos, the guy's gonna give it back to you. Now what are you gonna do then? Then you're gonna have to toivel it. But if it's not yours, then you can't make a bracha. So you're gonna do a mitzvah without a bracha. So the Taz says, but then again, if it's not yours, how could you toivel with a bracha? Still the guy's. So the Taz says, therefore, after Shabbos, get it back from the guy, but don't make a bracha. Now, this is a little strange to me, because why didn't the Taz say the better eitzah, which really takes a shulchan and kuf mem vav, sif katan vav spells this out. Tell the guy after Shabbos, I want it back, give it to me. Either give me matana gemura, or buy it off the guy for a few, whatever it is, whatever he wants, but make a kinyan gomer. And that's why the Shulchan Asur B'Shtayim B'Zalma Shmir Shabbos also says this, that after Shabbos, don't just take it back and, leave it to fate. Tell the guy, I want you to give it to me for keeps. Now, once it's yours, then you toivel it properly with a bracha. The Taz, for some reason, was concerned you wouldn't make a proper kinyan. But we're going to say, if you want to do it right, give it to the guy for Shabbos. After Shabbos, take it back, make a kinyan gomer, it's yours, and make a bracha. Now, Lamaisa, the main problem is because you're losing out a bracha. So I was thinking, and I found the Archaim HaKadosh says this in Pri Toyar, Yeridei Sif Katan Tezvav. Why don't you have a better suggestion? Give it to the guy before Shabbos or on Shabbos. Amatona manas lahachzer. And if it's good for Dalad Minim, like the Mechaber says in Archaim, why isn't it good for Tfilas Kelim? And then when the guy gives it back to you, it's a complete kinyan, and then you're fine, and you can make a bracha. The question I have is that the Shulchan Aruch discusses this eitzah in Archaim and Yeredeya, but doesn't mention the eitzah amanas lahachzir. In Archaim Tafresh Nun Ches Beis regarding the Alminim, the Mechaber spells out Matan Amanas lahachzir. Why didn't he make this eitzah regarding the Alminim? Regarding Tfilas Kalim? And the emphasis, I saw the Arugas Habaysim in a Tshuva in Yeredeya Kuf Chav Beis Gimel. He says Tzarachin if it works. He doesn't say why yes, why not. He doesn't quote the Archaim HaKadosh. But then I saw the Ksaf Seifa in a Tshuva in Archaim Siman Samach Aleph, who also doesn't quote the Archaim HaKadosh, but he has a different problem. He says the Mechaber says give it to a guy as a matana. What about this? You're not going to give a guy a matana. So he said, well, the Pashta Teretz is you're not doing it for his benefit, you're doing it for your benefit to solve the issue. But then at the end he writes, come on, a short paragraph, he writes something beautiful. He says, maybe a matana manas lahachzir is a great idea. Because maybe there's no issur loiseichanim if you're giving it to him with strings attached. I'm getting it back. So there's no loiseichanim. But I'm not sure, he says, if a manas lahachzir is going to take away the chi of tfilas kalim. Because maybe a manas lahachzir is not a kinyan, it's not a permanent kinyan. And maybe it's not enough of the guys that there's no chi of tfilas kalim. So the Ksaf Seif already bavarn that maybe it's not a complete kinyan that's mafkir the chi of tefillah. So maybe that's why the Arugas Habaysim had a suffix. Maybe that's why Mechaber didn't bring it. But the Archaim HaKadosh is convinced that it works. And I also must point out the Birkei Yosef and Archaim in the end of Siman Tov Kuf Tes says Yiram that the Shulchan Aruch holds you have to give the guy a kinyan gomer matana gemura kama. I think he means say, but not manas lahachzir. Maybe it's the same svar. Okay. L'chayr is a more simple eitzah to avoid the issue, and that is one just take your becher on Shabbos and be mafker it. It's in front of 3 people, I'm being mafker it. Then pick it up and don't be kind it, then use it and put it back. And after Shabbos, hopefully no one took it, you could take it back again. Be mafker it. And I talk about Yashiv and Asher Ya'ish and Chelik Beis, Amit Shil and Ches says this eitzah. Hefka is not chayiv and tefillah. But then I saw the Mincha Shloim and Chelik Beis in Samach Vav Tezayin. He says it's not an eitzah to be mafker it because as soon as you pick it up, it's nira. It's lashid nira k'chayzev v'zoycha boy. So apparently it's too much of an arama perhaps. I don't know, maybe it means arama, maybe it means taka, you're being kainit. But that would be a pretty good eitzah. You'd have to come on to kinyanim. But it's an eitzah which sounds funny, but it's really a good eitzah in halacha. Let's say it's already a chi of gama to toiveled, and it's already Shabbos, not ben hashmoshes. Ask a guy to accompany you to the mikveh, and tell him, the guy, to toiveled on Shabbos, and you make sure he does a good job. You'll be the mashgiach. What's the pshat? Because even though you're telling a guy to do malacha on Shabbos, but this at most an issur d'Rabbanan, and this is a shvus to shvus, b'makom mitzvah. And who says this eitzah? First of all, who says that a guy's tefillah works? So that's mafrish. Yeredeya Kuf Chaf Sif Tezvav, the Mechaber says if a guy toiveled it, it's kosher. The only problem is you don't trust him that he did it right. But obviously if you're watching him and he did it right, so the tefillah is good. I saw the Mekar Chayim and Sifkat and Zayin, Til David, Sifkat and Yudalid. Both say if you have no other choice, go with the guy to the mikveh and make sure he toivels it right, and then you could use it. And there's no suffix that the tefillah is good. The only issue the Pri Megadim in the beginning of Reish Samach Aleph has, the only problem with this eitzah is you ended up doing a mitzvah without a bracha. Now, of course, the guy is not mechuyev to make brachas. But you have a kei that you have to toivel with the bracha. By the guy doing it, you lost the bracha. And the truth is, I'll read you the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch in Kuf Chav Sif Tezvav. Im hitbil keil madiyakum also lahem tvila. If the guy toiveled it is good. Frek the Taz, why are you being so like b'di'eved? If the guy did it, it's good. Why don't you say the guy could toivel it? So the Taz, no. L'chatchila, don't allow the guy to toivel it, because you, the yid, lose the bracha. So, Bazai, the Pri Megadim is saying, tak, if the guy toivels it for you, the tefillah is perfectly kosher, and you could use the bechel l'chatchila. But you could avoid it you should avoid it because you're losing the bracha. Better wait till after Shabbos and do it yourself. Oh, but the shaila is, if you have no other choice, that would be an eitzah. But don't forget, really, the tefillah of a guy is a good eitzah, but you're losing the bracha. Now, the next eitzah, which is quoted in Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah actually in Siv Zayin, based on two Rishonim, the Magen Mishnah and the Goyis Maimoni. Let's say you have a becher, same case, and there's no guy around to give it to him. And it's already after Ben Hashmash, you can't toivel it. So the Ramah quotes two Rishonim, what's called harama. Take the becher, go to the mikveh, and don't toivel it. You're drawing out water to drink. So that's nira, like you're taking water. Now, of course, we'll soon see it has to be water that's drinkable. Our mikveh, I don't advise you to drink. But you have to realize the amolig mikvahs often were either a mayan, a well, very fresh water, or a nahar. So if the water is drinkable, so you're not toiveling a chas v'shalom, you're taking out water to drink. And this is what's known as the heta of harama, that is not noticeable. But the obvious question is, who are you fooling? I'm not toiveling now, I'm just drinking water. I mean, who are you fooling? But for us, it's masuk midvash. Really, toiveling is not an issur because there's no physical noticeable change. What's the worst scenario? It's nira k'mesakin. No, if it's not nira k'mesakin, there's no issur. So that's the havana of the Rishonim, that if it's harama, a legitimate harama is mutter. Now, I hope you realize that this concept of harama is very much part of our Shabbos and Yomtov living. Because the Gemara in Beya, the same sugya, this Gemara Yudches, asked, oh, you're not allowed to toivel a kale nira k'mesakin? So how could a person go to the mikveh? A person, and in this case an issur, also goes to the mikveh and makes a bracha on Shabbos Yom Tov. I nira k'mesakin? The Gemara says, no, it's not nira k'mesakin, nira k'meika. You're just cooling off. Who are you fooling? Teretz is, if it's an issur gomer, you can't say I'm playing games. You don't play games with the Bnei Shalom. But at most, it's an issur of nira k'mesakin. If it's nira k'meika, it's not nira k'mesakin. So nira k'mesakin is not my creation or the Rishonim, it's a Gemara. But the problem, the real practical problem is today our mikvahs, no one drinks from it. And as early as the Torah Shabbos, Yud Gimel, the Makar Chaim, and our Simon, the Aruch HaShulchan, in Sifir Aleph, all say that it has to be logical that it's nira drinking. But our mikvahs, it doesn't work. Now some say, so maybe if it's not nira, they're drinking, it's like you're rinsing the becha in the mikvah water. You don't have to drink it. But then again, I think our mikvahs, the becha will become more dirty if you rinse it in the mikvah. So it has to work. But there's another problem with this eitzah. Let's say you want to be really erlich, and you have a mayan within the erev. But it's got to go out to the night. You take your friend. Come with me to mayan. I want to get the cup of water. Okay, so he follows you. You dip the keli into the mayan. You pick it up, hold it, and you make a bracha. Baruch atah Hashem. And what's the end of the bracha? Al tfilas keli or kelim. He goes, hey, you're supposed to say Shaki B'vari. But you want to make a bracha on the tefillah. Zok the Magen Avram. So if you're going to make a bracha on the tefillah, you blew your cover. It's no longer nira k'sheping water. And Zok the Magen Avram. So if you're going to use this eitz of harama, it only works if you don't make a bracha. Oh, oy bazoi, Zok the Mishnah Berurah and Sharat Tzion says, if that's the case, so it's not a good eitzah. Because you're losing a bracha. The Mishnah in Truma, the first parak, says a person who's not dressed properly should not take off Truma, should not be Tayrim. Why? Nothing wrong with being Tayrim when a person is not dressed properly. The problem is you can't make a bracha. So Zok to Sharat Tzion, we see that if you do a mitzvah without a bracha, it's wrong. So here, although the tefillah will work because it's harama, but you can't make a bracha. I'll say, what's the problem? I'll be toiveled on Shabbos, a harama. After Shabbos, I'll toivel it again and make a bracha then. But that's ridiculous. Because the first tefillah was good, you can't make a bracha after Shabbos. So Zok the Mishnah Berurah and Sif Katan Lamed Vav, he says, if the harama works, but you have a problem, you're losing the bracha. What? Oh, very good. So here the question is, first of all, quietly is an eitzah, but I have a better question. The makar of nira, this eitzah of harama, is based on a Gemara. Adam nira kemeka. Now, Adam in this context means an isha, and the minig is women make a bracha on tefillah. No one says that an isha toiveled on Shabbos or Yomtov can't make a bracha. So, for the Yeshua's Yakov asks, why do you say you can't make a bracha by toivel keli, but an isha does make a bracha? So Yeshua's Yakov, he's cut and haste, is a beautiful yesod. When do you make a bracha on tefillas keli? Before you toivel it. Oh, that's a giveaway. But Nashim make the bracha after. So the tefillah was successful. So afterward doesn't bother us. Frek the Mishtabur and Bialacha, but the minig of Svardim, the Mechabashita is that even women make the bracha before the tefillah. So Zok Chavetz Chaim, a brilliant yesod. Must be the teretz is that if when you toivel something, it's obvious why you're doing it. Lamashal. The Gemara says if it's freezing, what do you mean you're toiveling? Who are you fooling? So if what b'shas the tefillah it's nicker, so then it's not harama. But if when you make a bracha and then you toivel it, but when you're toiveling it, there's no bracha. Before or after doesn't make a chilik. But b'shas the tefillah it's not nicker what you're doing, so the Rama works. And therefore the Chavetz Chaim says it's probable. He's arguing on the Magen Avraham. It's possible and probable that you're allowed to make a bracha on the tefillah. That Rama is good, and the bracha before or after makes no chilik. As long as it's not nikah b'shas the tefillah. If you toivel in dirty water where the tefillah is nikah, that you're fooling, that it's not true, you're fooling yourself only, that's a problem. But if the shas the tefillah, it's not nikah, it's okay. But then he says, I found it's machlokes rishonim, and the Magen Avraham is not happy with this. So he's concerned, Lamaisi holds not to make a bracha. But I want to say, I saw a very thorough tshuva in the Mikdanes Eliyahu, Chelik Beis, Kuf Chav Beis, Utaka says that there's enough poison that hold you allowed to make a bracha quietly, like you said, because Lamaisa no one knows. Now, you know you're making a bracha, but then again, you know it's harama. So, halacha Lamaisa, I would be wary of making a bracha because the Chavetz Chaim and Bialacha holds not to. But there are poskim, he quotes a number of poskim that hold the bracha could be said quietly. So now let's talk tachlis lamaisa. You have a keli you didn't toivel before Shabbos, and it's on Shabbos. We have a few eitzes, bein hashmashos, having a guy toivel it, giving it to a guy and borrowing it back, or harama. Which is the best eitzah? So the Prima Godlim is very clear, and he spells this out. The Sharatzian quotes the Reish Samach Aleph Ches, that the best eitzah is chaprayim bein hashmashos. Because you could do it, no kinyan necessary, and you can make a bracha. The question is, let's say it's already Shabbos mamish, so the Bejanarov and Das Torah, the end of Siv Zayin, the Til David and Siv Kot and Tezvav say, the better eitzah is, give it to a guy, kinyan gomor, and after Shabbos get it back, and then toivel with a bracha. Because even though you're making a kinyan on Shabbos, but the kinyan is justifiable. The Kaf HaChaim has a big chiddush, as he's cutting and beis, and he says, how could you give it to a guy, you're making a kinyan? Better, he says, the other eitzah. Better have a guy toivel it. Or, which is hard to understand. Or harama. Hard to understand. Because then you can't make a bracha. Isn't it a better eitzah to give it like we said, to give it to a guy temporarily? So he's worrying about the kinyan, but we said the kinyan is not a problem because it's Tzarech Shabbos. Interesting question. You have a keli that you have to toivel, and you're about to toivel it. You're about to pick it up. You say, what am I doing? Why isn't this keli muktzeh? When Ben Hashmashis came, when Shabbos came, it wasn't getoivel. I can't use it. Migdis got tzoyle Ben Hashmashis, got tzoyle kula yoyma. If someone has a basar b'chalav, so on Shabbos it's muktzeh, even though it's food, because you can't use it. According to many shittas, shatnez, a clothing of shatnez, is muktzeh, because you can't use it. So the question is, why don't we say that this keli sheloi taval became muktzeh bein hashmashis? However, from the Shulchan Aruch in three places, we'll see, in Hilchos Shabbos, Hilchos Yomtov, and Hilchos in Yeridea, it talks about eights, no one says it's muktzeh. So Rabbi say for us it's beautiful, why it's not muktzeh? Since you have so many eights, So why should it be muktzeh? You're right, now you can't use it, but you have eitzes. Now, if someone remembered he didn't toivel, he goes, oh, if I fall and I can't use it, oh, it's a shad. And he was masiyach das consciously, and a chanami, he made a muktzeh. But if someone just forgot the whole thing, so it's not something that's not usable, find an eitz and use it. Rav Shlomo Zalman and Shulchan Shlomo and Shinches Sif Mem Zayin has kedarka, a little more of a chiddush, and he says the truth is even a keli sheloi tovel has use as is. You could put in things, storage containers that you don't bring to the table is not chayiv and tefillah. So that's his take on the matter. But I think the biggest raya is the Mechaber in 3 places discusses eitzes for a keli sheloi tovel, and there's no mention of being in muktzeh. The teretz must be like we said. Now, consider this question, which I think is an important point to highlight. Let's say you have a keli sheloi tovel, you have no eitzah whatsoever. There's no guy around, you can't make harama because there's no mikveh around, whatever, there's mamish, there's no clean mikveh around, I meant to say. There's mamish no eitzah. None of the eitzahs work. So what's the eitzah? So I'll tell you what the Bayashu one, they asked them, what's the eitzah? So wer sagt dann eitzah alts? Like who said it has to be an eitzah? Or I tell people, I'm not dial a heta. I can't, create a heta. Who says an eitzah? But listen to this. The Chayodim in Memdal Yezayin says, nearly, if you have a keli that you desperately need on Shabbos, and he makes a very desperate picture, and without it you can't eat on Shabbos, and you need these kelim, and there's no other eight, you're allowed to toivel it yourself. Why? You're allowed to rely on the Beis Yosef. You're allowed to rely on the Rif and the Rambam, Geis Yidin. So we see how that original shita, that there's no issur tefillas kelim, the Chayodim relies on the b'shas adchak. Now, the truth is, I think it's almost never going to be negeya that you have nothing to eat with, and people have dishes. But I wanted to bring out that this shita of the Beis Yosef, based on a Rambam and a Rif, is a shita, the Rambam and the Rif, and the Chayodim is saimach on that b'shas adchak gomu. Now, this we spoke till now was on regarding Shabbos. On Yomtov, Zok the Mechaber in the end of Tov Kuf Tes, there's no different Shabbos and Yomtov, toivel everything before Shabbos or Yomtov. But Zok the Mishtabur Sif Cotton Lamid, let's say you have a keli that you didn't toivel, and it's mamish tzorech oichel nefesh for Yomtov. So tefillah is considered machshiri oichel nefesh, and halacha ve'imorin came, but halacha l'mayis you're allowed to toivel it on Yomtov. The one chilek Shabbos and Yomtov is that machshiri oichel nefesh you're allowed to toivel it. Then the Mishtabur add, if it's a glass dish that you didn't toivel, halacha umayrin came. So a Rav could theoretically tell a person on Yomtov, if you need it, you have nothing else, you'll add a toivel on Yomtov with a bracha, no aram is necessary. Another question I wanted to mention, let's say you bought a pot that needs tefillah, but you're not going to get around to toivel it, you put it away until the next time you go to the mikveh. So it's interesting, the question is, are you allowed to do that? Why not? There's no issur bayira on a pot. But now we learned the whole sugya that there's an issur shema yisha. And that's why the Aruch HaShulchan writes, if you have a keli sheloi tovel, don't keep it around the house. Shema yisha applies to tumas, to keli, to a new keli. But the truth is, we never heard of this. And the emes is, the Machzah Shekel already says, who said shema yisha applies to a keli sheloi tovel? A keli that's tamei, that's metama something else, that's a menace. It's a problem. You got to get rid of it. You got to toivel it. But a keli sheloi tovel, even if you used it, it doesn't answer the food. So that's why the minhag seems to be that we do keep telim sheloi tovel until we get around to it. There is no issur shema yisha regarding these type of items. And the last group of questions, a fascinating group of questions, is when else does the nirka masakin apply? I'll give you a simple example. Okay. Someone has a keli that he didn't kasher before Yomtov or Shabbos. Can he kasher it on Shabbos or Yomtov? So the emes is, what are you doing? You're turning from issur into heta. That's nirka masakin. And as early as the Trumas Hadeshin in Siman Nundal, quoting Marach Or Zerua, has a different question, but mamish, listen to his yisoid. The halacha is, if you have something that's assur, but you could turn it into heta by being mevatel the issur, adding more heta to make it mutter. So the truth is, ein mevatlan issur lechatchila. We don't do that in Hilchos Yeridea, als kashrus. But in some instances, I'll soon give you an example, there's no issur of being mevatl issur lechatchila. You're allowed to add more, I make it mutter. So they asked the marach or zarua, can I make mevatl the issur on Shabbos or Yomtov? So his response, and I quote, ein lecha tikkun gadol mizu, and just like tefillas kelim is awesome, ein mevatl issur on Shabbos or Yomtov, because you're being mevatl and issur, you're turning issur into heta. And the Mishnah Berurah quotes this clearly in our Siman Shin Chav Gimel. And I'll give you a simple example. If, let's say, fish fell into the cholent, so it's sakana, you know how to eat it. So according to some shitas, even though ein mevatl issur lechatchila, you're not allowed to add more milk, more meat to mevatl milk that fell into cholent, ein mevatl issur lechatchila. But if fish fell into meat, it's not really awesome, it's sakana. And once you add more cholent to make it bottle, not that you were mevatl an issur, you took away sakana. You sort of nullified the sakana. So you're allowed to add more meat to make the fish bottle. Now I'm not saying all agree, but there's such a sheet, especially the makom of Einik Shabbos, you can rely on shemitz le'ed davaro. So let's assume there's no issur mitzad yeridei or mevatl issur chatchila. Can I add the cholent on Shabbos to mevatl the fish? I'm turning issur into heta. That's a good example. That's a problem. You're turning issur into heta. What's the difference? It's sakana issur, you're turning issur into heta. And the poskim, that's like a problem. You're not allowed to be mevatl issur on Shabbos or Yomtov because that is nirka masakin. Okay. Now let me ask you about kashering a keli. Can you kasher a keli on Shabbos or Yomtov? Now the truth is, it's pretty hard to kasher keli on Shabbos. You have to have boiling water. Where do you have boiling water from? But let's say Yomtov, you're allowed to boil water. So this is, according to many poskim, is taka awesome. It's the same nirka masakin. But I must mention that there are those that are mekel. And listen to this. The Machab and Shin Chav Gimel Sif Ches has the next Sif of our Simon. If a guy drank wine in your kais and leftover wine, so now the yain is yain nesach, of course, and the kais is also to use. So you have to rinse out the kais well before you use the kais. The kais is not treif, but the wine is treif. So the Mechaber says, but you're allowed to wash out that kais on Shabbos or Yomtiv, and there's no issur of nirka masakin. Why not? You're not allowed to toivel a keli. Why can't you use this keli and wash it out? Teretz is very poshut. If the keli is treif, if it wasn't get toiveled, that's nirka masakin. The keli that has some wine of the guy, you can't drink the wine, but the kais is not treif. I'll give you a mashal of sabres ha'oizim. Imagine a mother tells a child, wash the dishes. We need this dish for tomorrow's Suda. Child says, no, I can't. Nirka masakin. I don't want to. He's right. You can't use dirty dishes. But dirty dishes are not treif. You have a problem, so get rid of the problem. So the Mechaber says if you have a kais that's treif, because it wasn't good toiveled, that's nirka masakin. A kais that's kosher that has treif for wine, so clean out the wine and drink gesundheit. So some poskim want to say that a keli that has blias of tarfas, the keli itself is fine. You have a problem, so get rid of the problem. So they compare a keli that's treif to a keli that has wine of yayin nesach in it. But the Pima Godim in Mishvah Sikot Zayin says no. A treif of keli means that it has absorbed blias and it's treif. And the Mishnah Berurah Taka Paskins like this. And our Siman Shin Chav Gimel. So that's why Lamaisa, the minig is of course not to kasher kelim on Shabbos or Yomtiv. But if you look at the Mishnah Berurah Taf Kuf Tes Sifkot Chavav Hilchos Yomtiv, he says many poiskim's lashon is are makel to kasher on Yomtiv because it's not a masakin. It's just that there's a problem in the walls of the keli. So b'shas atchak on Yomtiv there's more of a tzad to be makel. I'll tell you a fascinating shayla. We just had Pesach b'Shabbos last year, and many people, whether it was dentures or braces, and it was a problem unavoidable because you had to eat Shabbos morning chametz, and then you had to all of a sudden turn over and become Pesach dik. So those that had either dentures or braces, they had to sort of kasher it before the zman, the soif zman. You don't kasher on Shabbos. So Reb Shlomo Zalman in Mincha Shloima, Tinyana, Siman Samach, Sif Kot Lamas is a brilliant yisoid. Look again, you'll see it's not a problem. Because when you're kashering these braces or these dentures, it's still the Zman Achilas Chametz. It's not treif. So you're doing it now for later, but now it's not treif. If it's not treif now, you're not nirka masakin. You're doing it now for later. What about achana? So that's not a problem because you only could do it now. What he's saying is it's not treif to be nirka masakin. We had this question, when someone had a splinter. So if you get out the splinter without causing to bleed, you're allowed to pull out the splinter. But people are very makbid. They want to first sterilize the needle, put it in the fire, so it shouldn't have germs. So the Ber Moshe in Chelik Aleph Simon Gimel discusses sterilizing Bichlal on Shabbos for a child. Is that a nirka masakin? And he basically says if it's usable as it is, it's just an extra precaution, it's not a masakin. But specifically the Shmir Shabbos in Lamed Hey, Yud Zayin and Yago, he says, but sterilizing a needle has another problem. If you put metal into fire and it turns glowing hot, that's the issur of havara, either bishul havara, machama matchis. So he says you have to put it in, take it out right away. He says probably better to use a sterilizing liquid, but don't put it in the fire. But miyikid it in, the problem is not masakin, the problem is maybe of making it into a glowing metal. A common child, and people, they talk, they say it, I have wine left over and I want to use it, let's say the wine from Kiddush, I want to use it for benching, but it's pogum, so I'm masakim the yayin pogum. Is that nirka masakin? So Dr. Shlomo Zalman in Shmir Shabbos, in Mem Zayin Ayin Hey, the Shuas Yakov tak is machmer, but he doesn't understand why. Because it's not tray for wine, it's just not a hiddur for kaisel bracha. You could drink it. So it's not enough of masakin to be a problem. An interesting ha'ara, a mezuzah fell out of the case onto the floor. So the Yid, of course, picked it up and kissed it. And on Shabbos, he wanted to stick it into the mezuzah holder, not knock nails, no binyan whatsoever. Just stick the mezuzah back into the case. The shaila is that nirka masakin? Because till now, your room had no mezuzah. Now the room has a mezuzah. So both the Tzitz Eliezer, Yud Zayin, and Gimel, Neshevet Alevi, Dalet Kufim, Gimel both say that that's wrong. Because a room without a mezuzah is not assur to live in the room, just a mebitl asay. So if there's no issur to live in that room, then it's not nirka masakin. The only issue they discuss, barichas, is there a problem of moisval binyan, which is not for now. And two more shilas, I'll tell you one shilah, interesting, typically mikvahs of today have the mikvah and the bar. The mikvah that change the water, hopefully occasionally, and the bar that stays. So when they change the water, they make hashaka, and everything is shalom al Yisrael. Some people like to pull out the shtapa and make their own hashaka and toivel when there is hashaka at that moment. The question is that nirka masakin? After all, you're making the mikvah more kosher. So the emphasis, if you look in the Mishnah Beya that we mentioned, it's a beferish that you're allowed to be mashikin mikvah. But the truth is, our case is more pasha than it's mutter. Because the mikvah is really kosher. Navas, what you're doing is a hiddur. Hiddur is not nirka masakin. But I would mention, if there's a big sign, don't touch the shtapa, don't make the hashaka, so that's the avla. Probably a person comes out less kedusha if he violates the rules than what he's doing. But last but not least, which is really beautiful how a sugya mamish goes to the last nekuda, is the question we began, an isha bake challah, bake bread, I'll use the word before Shabbos, forgot to take off challah. Now Shabbos comes, and l'chayra, the bread is also to eat, and it's probably muktzeh l'chayra. And the emes is enechanami. If you're living in Eretz Yisrael and they have bread that wasn't taken off, challah was not taken off, the bread is muktzeh, and you can't eat it. But here we have a chiddush regarding chutz la'aretz, because really the issur of challah, which is mamash mitzvah shamayim, is only in Eretz Yisrael when roiv yoshveh aleho, which today is not so in Eretz Yisrael. So in Eretz Yisrael today, challah is an issur mitzvah rabbanan. But in chutz la'aretz, it was never ever a deraisa. To quote the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch in Shin Chav Gimel Aleph, chalas chutz la'aretz is only a mitzvah. So like tishtakach toiras challah means we're going to live in chutz la'aretz. We never heard of challah. Go to Eretz Yisrael, people say challah. What's that? I never heard of that. Nah, it's a chumrah. I ain't think of chumrah. So you have to keep challah. It shouldn't be forgotten, the mitzvah of challah b'chlal. So therefore, the Paiskim say, and this is the Bems Machab and Shinchaf Gimel Aleph, the Machab says that if you forgot to take off challah in Chutz La'aretz, the challah is not really treif. You have a mitzvah to take off challah. So I will give you a mashal. It's something like a door without a mezuzah. So therefore, the Machab says, eat challah, the bread gesund to hate. Leave over a big piece. After Shabbos, take off a little piece l'shem hafrasha, and the Kashering spells out, make a bracha, and then burn that. I was to have to eat a whole Shabbos because the bread is not treif. I want you to take off challah on Shabbos. No, that we don't do. That much we don't do. But this would be the eitzah, eat gesund tehei, leave over a piece. After Shabbos, take off a small piece. Although the Shmir Shabbos, in Aleph Chavtes, quote from Shama Zalman, that a Motzei Shabbos not to make a bracha, but the Kashering seems to feel you could because there was no afrasha on Shabbos. I got to talk to you all.
Shem Ergen Shir, I can give a big yesher kach to Smith for today's shir. Bez Hashem after Mincha, Rav Smith will say a sikum on today's shir. Kanani ben a Kashering, Motzeh gesprochen l'zakes, es issur, l'friege hevel, l'tayr mitzvos, shenem al, l'nei chofes, l'man sidkei, yagdol teviah.